Hello, good morning if you're in San Diego in the West Coast like Megan Kalmoe is, or good afternoon if you're anywhere within Europe watching this live. It's great to have you guys with us. I'm so excited because today we have one of the legends of the sport, absolute legends, Megan Kalmoe. I know you're looking a bit quizzical there, Megan, but I think in terms of everything you've done over the course of 4 Olympics and with your blog, and what you've done for the sport has been absolutely amazing. So it's so great to have you on Crossy's Corner today. Thank you for being with us.
Well, I'm flattered that you would think of me, and I'm so glad that you invited me. So thanks for for reaching out. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Megan. So just before we get going, just a reminder, if you didn't know already, that Crossy's Corner is supported by Ludum. That's the performance management and analysis tool for sports, coaches and training groups. And you can start a 30-day free trial by visiting ludum.com. So, Megan, it's going to be really interesting after your long career. How many years have you been rowing now?
I walked onto the rowing team at the University of Washington in 2002, and then went straight to the training center in 2006, and really didn't take any time off. So right now is the first break I've had in 2021. So we're talking about close to 20 years.
20 years. So how's it been since Tokyo? What has life been like for you? What are you doing? What are you spending your time doing?
Well, we had to come straight back from Tokyo, as everyone knows. Not a lot of travel or anything like that afterwards. And basically, I packed up in Princeton and drove across the country to relocate back to San Diego, which is where my home base has been since Rio, actually. My pair partner, Tracy, was good enough to co-pilot with me on the road trip across the country, which was really fun. And then, since then, I've just been back in San Diego hanging out with my boyfriend, Peter, and our cat, who may make an appearance on this video. I'm not sure if he's up to it or not. So just hanging out and enjoying kind of semi-retirement, enjoying the outdoor lifestyle of San Diego and seeing friends, and it's been great.
I know from reading your blog, which we can kind of get into, your amazing blog, that it looked like Rio was going to be your last games, and you were saying on the run-up, hello, Cat.
Hello, this is Cormac, everybody.
Hey. That Rio was going to be the last games, and you've said that Tokyo is the last games. Is that the case? Or not?
Yes, this is always the problem with retirement, right? Like you say, you want to retire, and then something else happens. I was really pretty convinced that Rio was going to be my last games. I think a lot of that was I thought I was going to be ready to be done because of how hard we had been working through Rio, and I thought I was just going to be exhausted and just not able to go on. But then, I just felt kind of unfulfilled and felt like I still had something to offer after Rio and wanted to come back. And I think I'm glad I did. I think I still have some thinking to do on all of that because the last 5 years have been really, really challenging. And as those kind of challenges presented themselves one after another, I started to feel like Tokyo was really, if I made it, was really going to be it because I was so frustrated and so down, definitely burned out and depressed at some points during the cycle. And then, wouldn't you know it, like the last couple of months of training, Tracy and I decided to kind of separate from the group and focus on the pair again. Sort of last minute, and we brought on Kate Burko as our coach. And man, what an uplifting experience that was for both of us. We just had such a turnaround in our mental health and our just excitement for the sport, and our love of rowing just really came back, and we were so excited to be at practice and be working with Kate and working with each other and rowing the pair. And that was just so refreshing after a kind of a long slog of trying to make the training center work when it really just wasn't working for us anymore, which was really a bummer for me. And I went to Tokyo and I was like, this is so great. I really want to keep doing this. But I owe a lot of that to Tracy and to Kate. And I think if it were to be something that we wanted to keep working on, it would depend on whether or not they were both available in the future.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm not sure I was expecting that answer, but I think reading your blog, I should have done really.
Yeah.
Let's just deal with Tokyo for the moment, because I was looking at the race of your B final, and just the guys that were in there, the Australians who
Yeah.
reckon they should have been challenging for a gold medal,
I think
and
everyone
then
probably thinks that. Yeah.
and then the Danes that had Phoebe Eriksson in, that were
Yeah.
really fast crew. The Romanians,
Mm-hmm.
yourselves were in there. I mean, it could have been a great final at any World Cup regatta. How do you look back on your sort of Tokyo 2021 campaign?
Well, I think Tokyo, going into it, having some experience with past games, I was anticipating that it was going to be, I don't know, a little subdued and kind of a bummer, because we weren't going to get kind of the full games experience, having kind of the COVID kind of overhang, right? Like, you're going to be masked and you're not going to be able to leave the village, and just not going to be able to interact with other athletes and teams on the same level and go to see other events, blah, blah, blah. But I think even with all of that, Tokyo exceeded my expectations.
Wow.
Which was really nice, because I tried to keep them realistic and kind of low, not because I thought it was going to be bad, but because I knew that there were a lot of obstacles that we were going to have to overcome to even get there, and then for the games to go all the way through, especially like if there would have been a bad outbreak in the village or something like that, what a nightmare that would have been. But I think everyone did such a good job and made us still feel so welcome, and it was still really fun to be there. And I did actually get to see kind of all the people that I wanted to see, even though maybe I shouldn't have hugged them or what I was supposed to be doing, but that was all really nice. And the racing was just some of the most fun, competitive, like really challenging racing I've ever gotten to do. And to do that at the games is like, yeah, like Tracy and I would have loved to have won a medal and have been faster in the field and all of that, obviously. But like, to race against a women's pair field like that is so cool. Like, to have the event be so competitive from like the top to the bottom of the field, and have it really feel like this is how the game should be. It should be really tight, and it should be really, really hard. Like, it should be the hardest racing that you do over the quad. That was awesome. I thought it was so cool to see the field really come up, and the midfield really kind of just get so much deeper and so much more exciting.
Yeah.
In that way, I was really excited, and I thought it was really cool, even though we didn't place well, and that was disappointing. But at the same time, we were racing so many like very, very good crews. Sorry.
Yeah.
Have some neediness today.
I think that field was really strong. Obviously, the pair that won, Gala and Prendergrass, an amazing pair, and you've had experience of racing both them and the British pair Glover and Stanning, who were obviously an outstanding pair.
Not Miss Stanning, it was Miss Swan at Tokyo.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Make that mistake, Martin.
No, my head, I should have made it more clear.
You said Glover and Stanning, 2,000 or 2 million times in your life, so.
Yeah. So you were racing Swan and Glover. Did you have a chance to chat to Helen at all about her being back in the pair, or say hi to her?
Helen and I have kind of an interesting relationship. I admire and like her very much, and she's really pretty cool with me. I mean, she's always very polite when I talk to her, but we've never really sat down and had like a nice chat. Which, I think I would love to do that at some point, because I've always thought of her as like kind of my greatest rival. I hope if she ever hears me say that she would take it as a compliment, because I just always thought that she was the person that I would want to beat the most.
Yeah.
I just had so much respect for her in that seat, and in particular that we were the same side, same seat for those years before Rio in particular. I just always was like, yep, she's the person that I want to go after, and that I would, aspire to be as good as. So, yeah.
It's really interesting, because I guess in a way Helen Glover's not the biggest in terms of her physique, and in that way there's a a significant similarity between the two of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I agree. And that's I think part of the reason that I respect her so much is because if she's able to do what she's able to do and not have to have, a 620 erg or be 6'3" to do it. So
Yeah. And can you just, for people watching that may not know, I mean, what's your height and your weight in terms of, where does that place you in terms of generally women that you're around in
mm,
the American squad?
um so I'm 5'10" and typically around 160. The last several years of my career, I had a hard time keeping weight on just because I was getting older. So a lot of times I'd be a little bit under 160, somewhere in like the 155 range. That was not for lack of trying, though. I was definitely trying to be more than that. Um, and in the US group, certainly before Rio, I would have been on the small side, probably the smallest athlete in the group. That
Wow.
changed a little bit after Rio. We trended a little bit smaller and had a few more kind of boat mover sized, or sorry, small boat mover sized people on the team. And so there were quite a few more people that were sort of my size in the group before Tokyo. But yeah, before Rio, I definitely would have been one of the smaller people. We had a lot of people that were 6'1", 6'2", more like in the kind of 180, 190 range. So.
Yeah. And I guess you weren't top of the group. I know that you're kind of an anaerobic athlete. I think I heard you, or I read that you described
At
yourself
one time
as.
I was, yes, a long time ago, many moons ago. But yes.
So your ergo is not the biggest, either on 2K.
I wouldn't say that was true necessarily. I mean, when I was younger, my power scores were actually quite good, especially for my size.
Relative to
Um,
your weight.
yeah, I mean, I think the best 1 minute that I ever did was like a 528 watts,
Whoa.
which for being a smaller person is not terrible.
Yeah.
It's not amazing, but it's not so bad. Um, my best 2K that I ever did was also when I was a little bit younger. I did 637. So that's, I mean, for someone under 6 foot, I'm pretty proud of that. So
One thing I
6K
was,
actually is not that good.
because I was reading you write about your ergometer scores and, about doing PRs
Mm,
and I was trying to understand why an athlete like you or any athlete would do their best, their 2K PR when they were young, and then do all that training where they're obviously getting quicker, I would think,
mm.
and they don't PR on their 2K erg.
Once you get to be close to 40, you mean?
Yeah,
Believe me, if I could have PR'd on my 2K in the last 10 years, that would have been amazing. I actually don't know so much about physiology that I should talk about this with a lot of authority, but to me, it just seemed like I was moving from kind of my anaerobic roots or like kind of my genetic gifts that I was born with towards training into a more aerobic zone. So losing some of that kind of raw max power stuff and then just starting to rely more on the aerobic systems, which on the erg, I don't know if that's as helpful for those short pieces like a 2K.
yeah.
But like I
I
said, I did PR on my 6K in the year before Tokyo.
Whoa.
So I mean, my 6K before that was not very good, and it's still not that good. But
Yeah.
the fact that I did that before Tokyo was also I was pretty proud of that, even though it's still not very fast.
Just before, I still want to just look at Tokyo a little bit more and the performance of the American women's eight in particular. But just thinking about you in terms of physiology, do you have a sense? Can you explain to people why you lasted so long up until now, and maybe even longer in the sport, given that you weren't? I mean, obviously your power to weight ratio must be phenomenal. I'm guessing maybe that's got something to do with it. But why you? Why did you last so long? Why did you remain at
Um,
the coalface?
I'm extremely stubborn. It's just like I'm like a cockroach. I'm very difficult to kill.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, honestly, I don't know if it's specific to, physiology for reasons. I think if anything, it's more like an orthopedic thing. Like, I didn't ever have, a point where I was like, "Okay, my back is so blown out," or like, "Both of my shoulders are so destroyed that I can't physically do this anymore." Because I think a lot of people who go through, 2 or close to 3 cycles even get to that point where they're just like, "My back is killing me. I can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
Um, or it's a mental fatigue. A lot of people are just like, "Wow, I just put up with Tom for 8 years or 12 years or whatever. I don't wanna see him anymore." Um, so I'm not really sure that it had, a specific thing to do with my physiology or my erg scores, and maybe more some other things, like just literally toughing it out with my body and my brain. That would
Uh,
be my assessment.
and it's I guess we can get into this when we talk about your blog, but you kind of some of that stubbornness you can see in your blog because you on occasions you are very harsh on yourself, it seems.
Yeah, and I do think that that could also be a reason why, yeah, that I stuck around because I think constantly feeling like that there's more in yourself to give or that you are not done getting better. If you have the opportunity to keep getting better or become the best, that's really hard to walk away from. At least it is for me. So
Yeah.
um, that's always been a thing that has kept me interested in the sport as well. And
Yeah.
if I were to come back for Paris, certainly that would be part of it.
Yeah. Wow. Um, could I just ask you about the US women and the eight in particular? Because if I remember correctly, I think did they won their first heat, didn't they,
Yep, they did.
in the Olympics? And we were talking about ergometer scores and all the rest of it, and there was some fearsome power in that American women's eight.
Yeah.
Um, I think before the games, I had them, and I don't think I was the only one that I had them. Definitely challenging for a medal, and
Mm.
maybe one of the sort of gold medal slots. What happened to that crew between the heat and the final, and why were they not able to pull out something that was more special than the performance they did?
This is a tough question for me to answer because I wasn't in that boat.
Yeah,
Um, and I think for me to, give you an answer that would satisfy everyone in that boat is it's unlikely.
yeah, it's a good shout.
Yeah. My assessment, just looking in from the outside, a non-participant, is just that I think those guys were going to always have a huge, huge challenge ahead of them because of how young a lot of them were.
Ah,
And I know that people have talked about that a lot and maybe use it as an excuse or a crutch or whatever you want to call it, but like uh that was a huge ask of a lot of those guys. And I'm not saying that they're not good athletes or that they weren't up to it or that they didn't take it on or they weren't excited to take it on. It's just, I think if you've been in the sport for a while, you can recognize looking back when you were just starting what a different athlete you were your
yeah,
first season or two versus, once you've been to your first games or once you've, been around for a cycle or more. It's just you learn so much and
yeah,
grow so quickly, even in the first couple of years after your first season because you just don't know what you don't know. And I that's so frustrating as a young athlete to hear that because you're just like, I can't that's one thing that I don't have control over is I can't get, fast forward time and I can't go to more races all at once or anything like that. Like I can always erg harder or I can lift more or run more, or like any of these other things. That's all in my control. But like
yeah,
time and experience are things that you just have to wait for, which is so irritating when you're a young person because I remember being told that when I was first starting out in seat racing for the team in 2007, why I didn't make the team was because I didn't have enough experience to like figure out how to win the last seat race that I needed to win. And I was like, that is a crappy answer. I do not like that answer. Thank you so
yeah,
much. I would rather just be on the team. Uh, but I just didn't have that experience and that background to kind of understand that you just need some time. And I really give those guys so much credit for performing the way they did and stepping up to that challenge. But I do think, that whole crew could have benefited from a little more experience and just a little more time. Even getting to race once or twice internationally before the games.
Yeah, would have made a difference.
Yeah, so I think that was a big thing that they were up against that we just didn't have a way to work on before that. But if there was other stuff going on besides that, I couldn't speak to it because I wasn't there.
Yeah, that's very fair, Megan. I mean, rather like with Britain, there's been wholesale departures in British rowing. The CEO has left, the performance director, Brendan Purcell, has left. How justified is it that there seem to have been these really significant changes proposed in US rowing now after Tokyo?
So this is kind of this is tough for me because I do feel like one of the reasons that Tracy and I decided to kind of depart from the group and move back to the pair late in the game was because we did not feel like we agreed with the direction that the team was going, and that the changes that were already happening aligned with our values as athletes.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's even more change happening, it just seems it's a lot. And having been at the center and a part of the team since 2006, which is sort of like, no, it's not sort of like, it's definitely when the trajectory of the team really started to change, and the success of the women's sweep squad really kind of launched, right? That was the first year they won their world title during the streak. Kind of seeing that performance arc and being there through that whole process and seeing the culture and the discipline and the structure that's required to produce medal winning teams like that year after year, seeing all that dismantled is really heartbreaking for me.
Yeah.
I've really struggled with that over the past couple of years, and I've really been trying to advocate for kind of retaining some of that culture and structure and leadership style. And it just seems like it's not going to be possible to keep things the way that they were. I think the type of athlete that is joining the elite rowing scene at this point has changed from even when I was a young athlete entering the team, which I guess is a long time ago now. I don't know why I'm making it sound like it was last week. I do think that athlete upbringing and athlete values are starting to change, so that the way that the training center used to run in Princeton is not going to work for them anymore. And we learned that the hard way, I think, going into Tokyo, because it just didn't work.
Is there anything specific you could give an example that wasn't working, or is that not appropriate? Or
oh man, I mean, this is like a whole rabbit hole we could go down. But it just, we worked with a professional guy to try and see if we could, professional guy, team therapist, to see if we could find ways to kind of better kind of marry the I guess what you'd say, there were probably two groups in the training center. There was kind of the younger group and kind of the older group, definitely the younger group, and see if we could find ways to kind of work together to get our values to kind of align a little bit more. And it was just really a struggle. I don't know if I can be super specific, but like it has a lot to do, I think, for me with ideas of accountability and kind of individual drive and push. A lot of us that came in at a certain age didn't need a lot of attention or a lot of reinforcement other than being told that we weren't good enough. Like, you are not good enough to be on this team. You are not going to be on the team. And we'd be like, okay, like, what do I have to do in order to do it? I'll go away and do it, and then we'll talk later. And it just seems like a lot of the younger athletes are going to need a lot more kind of reassurance and kind of hands-on guidance, and just a little bit more intensive kind of one-to-one leadership that we're just not used to. So it was tough for us. We did struggle.
Yeah. So does that mean that will Tom Tahar still be coaching at Princeton?
Oh, I don't know. I have no clue. I have heard that he wants to, but that's as much as I know. I don't know what they're going to decide when they kind of figure out what the new structure is going to be. I think for sure they need to hire the new, I think they're calling it a chief high performance director, the CHPD. And whenever that person gets hired, I think that person is probably going to be more responsible for deciding who's going to coach where and what's going to happen.
There's word that Steve Redgrave has thrown his hat into that particular ring. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
My thoughts would be, why would he be interested in that? Like, USRowing is such a mess, and he's such a accomplished, intelligent person. I don't know why he would be attracted to the organization. Sorry, USRowing. I mean, I love you so much, and you've given me so much, but we're a mess right now. I don't think that's really for debate. So that was my initial response, is like, why would he want to do that? But if he does, that would be really a big win for us, because we could use someone that has a lot of experience, and I would imagine has like a pretty clear and direct leadership style, because and hopefully, one that would not draw a lot of distractions, I guess, because that is something I think that USRowing can get bogged down in. Administrators can have a lot of back and forth, and then stuff never really gets done.
Is it the same thing with the men's squad? Because I know that Mike Tati had issues hanging over in terms of complaints about his particular style, which is very emotional and very intense, on quite a lot of occasions. Is it the case of the more young athletes finding that particular style sort of too difficult to take, or is it a case of
what's interesting is I actually think it's the older athletes in the men's camp that had a harder time with Mike, and I don't know why that is, but I could be because there aren't actually that many athletes that are like my age or Megan Musnicki's age. The older athletes are actually kind of the same age as a lot of the younger athletes in our group. Or kind of the medium athletes, like the athletes that were graduating like 2015, 2016, that kind of age. But I actually don't know, because I have zero friends on the men's team. We've been so separate for a number of years now that I really didn't get the chance to know them really at all over the Tokyo cycle. So I really couldn't say.
Occasionally people put questions in, and there's DB Cooper has said, so this is just kind of random, slightly off piece, but it's an interesting question, which I guess we've talked about before. So the scholarships go into the top universities. What's your views on that?
I mean, this is an issue on the women's side as well.
Yeah,
I think
really.
it's noise on the men's side, just because the college system is just a little bit smaller, right? Like, they just don't have all of these NCAA programs. But the ones that do are going to get all the attention. So the Harvard, the Cal, the Washington guys that have tons and tons of international guys that come in. I mean, this is hard, because for me as a college athlete, I thought it was awesome that we had international people on our team.
Yeah.
That I was getting to interact with people from different countries and hear about their experiences as athletes in different places and learn from them, because we had like Romanians on our team, and that was so cool, because the early 2000s, like the Romanian sweep team was like, whoa, it's like giving me chills right now thinking about it. But having them on our team was like so exciting and so interesting. I mean, there were a few that I would have preferred that weren't there. We had some Canadian single scullers. Yuck, they were terrible. Sorry. But that was really cool for me. So as an athlete, and I think, and I hope that, the young athletes that are in school now really appreciate having that exposure to different athletic experiences from different countries. So that's a cool part of being a college athlete, I think, right now. But if you look at it kind of from the other side, which is the elite athlete development perspective, developing other under 23 athletes for other teams to take us out is probably not the best strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is hard. But I mean, there's definitely pros and cons. It's for the men's team specifically. I mean, honestly, I don't know. What are we going to do about that? It's really, really challenging. The men's team has struggled with this for such a long time, and I don't know that there's a good answer.
While we're talking about college rowing, if I guess if you looked through the inside of you, you'd have Husky written
Yeah.
through the inside of you. Do you want to just say something about being a Husky, why that's so important to you, and why it's so special?
I think part of the reason that I'm always so excited about it is because I didn't go there to row. I went to school for a whole year there, and just lived as like a normal freshman. I just went to parties and studied and had a job and just like kind of lived my normal student life, and then just happened to walk onto the team. And it was just sort of I could have never known the immensity of the impact that doing that would have had on my life. Like it really completely changed my life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, everything about the team, the culture, the kind of the legacy that we have there, and all the values that they instill in you as a young person, as a part of the team, and how you're really made to understand that it is a community and a family for you for the rest of your life. Just really made me feel so grateful to be a part of that and to get to row in one of the most dramatic and just absolutely spectacular settings in the entire country,
Yeah.
and to be able to have that really at my disposal every single day as a young person. There's no way I could have fully appreciated at the time. I really tried because everyone was always telling me that I should. But it's such a great community and such a great team, just, from the current athletes all the way to the oldest alumni. Everyone takes care of each other and looks out, and it's just, I love it so much. So I'm just really, really proud to be an athlete from there.
That's fantastic. I kind of just wanted to stuff on the Tokyo. You've been in the news a few times in terms of Olympics and things that you've said, and you're in the news at Tokyo because of saying some quite heartfelt comments about the Russian team and racing against the Russian team. What drew you to say that? And given a bit of perspective now, is there anything that you change, or you still feel quite strongly?
No, I feel pretty strongly about
Yeah.
it. And for all the bots and the spam and the trolls that emerged after all of that, I did also receive a lot of support. And even when I was still in Tokyo talking to other athletes and other coaches, there were a lot of people that also felt very frustrated by kind of the anti-doping community's inability to really do anything about
Yeah.
the Russian team and kind of the farce of the ROC and all of this. So, I mean, for me, like we talked about earlier, having the pair field be so competitive and so, inspiring and interesting to watch, and to see a crew kind of come out of nowhere after not really doing anything or having any record or anything like that, and watching Helen and Polly kind of miss out on the medal.
Yeah.
I hated that. I really hated that a lot. It just made me so uncomfortable and so upset. And in no way am I even suggesting that those two athletes specifically are doping. I never said that, and I would never
Yeah.
directly accuse anyone of doing that. But just in general, the fact that there's just been no accountability is just really hard, because everyone who comes from clean federations and has clean track records works so hard to stay that way. And for there not to be any consequences when it really matters is just really, really shitty, and it goes against everything that we kind of value as athletes, which is just fair play and following the rules and competing under a set of guidelines to see how you stack up.
Yeah. In 2016, you also hit the headlines again from a rather magnificent blog post. It wasn't called rowing. Was it called Rowing Through Shit?
No, it was
wasn't.
the title of that one was called "Stop Trying to Ruin the Olympics for Us."
Yeah, stop trying to. Yeah, sorry, it wasn't. I just made that dramatic headline up. But
I mean, what a headline that would have been. There was a line I said I would row through shit for you. That was
yeah, you
the
did say
tagline
that.
that it got picked up. Yeah,
Um,
I would. I still would. Sure, why not?
yeah, and that's really interesting because I guess behind that is how tough it was to make the Olympic team and what a focus the Olympics was for you, all you athletes, all the women involved in your crew and the squad. And the publicity was so negative.
It really was, wasn't it? Don't you remember how bad it was? It was like
Yeah.
constant, so much worse than really any other games. Although maybe you have a different perspective going into London because you were hosting, so it could have been much more dramatic for you guys.
London was very negative beforehand, and then all of a sudden it was, and it genuinely was the most wonderful thing. I mean, when
Yeah,
you look at what's happened to Britain now with Brexit and all the rest of it, it's like, what happened to the country that was in 2012, because the games were wonderful,
they
and
really were.
you would know that better than most. But yeah, the Rio post hit a chord with quite a few people, didn't it?
Yeah, that was when I started getting hate mail, and I
You're
was like,
kidding.
"Wow. Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not." I definitely got hate mail. I even got, like, written hate mail that people, like, took the time to handwrite and mail to me.
You're kidding.
No. Yeah, no, a lot of people felt like I was not a dignified American, and that I shouldn't be allowed to be on the Olympic team for saying something like that.
Whoa.
Mm.
I
But,
mean,
I mean, if anytime you're gonna say something in public, not everyone's gonna like it, you know? Some people are gonna hate it.
um, maybe this would be a good time to sort of talk about the genesis of megankalmoe.com and the
Ugh.
and the and the blog,
That was a
because
long time ago. I don't even know if I remember anything about that.
well, I mean, it is quite striking. I was trying to think of anyone else. I mean, people do websites and blogs, but they're nothing like as prolific, and they're nothing like as emotionally charged, that put you in almost a place where you can imagine what it was like. You know, you are extraordinary in terms of the way you write about the sport, or have written about the sport. So um, how come? Why you? And what purpose in your life did the blog serve?
Mm. I mean, I've always liked writing. I did English and Latin in college, so I've always been sort of a wordy language person. Writing comes pretty naturally to me. It's not usually a struggle. So I don't know. When I was coming onto the team, it just didn't feel like there was always a connection between what we were doing and people that supported us. Whether it was just fans or donors or alumni or whatever it was, it didn't necessarily seem that there was a way for them to connect with what it was actually like to do what we do. Um, and so I thought it'd be cool to start writing about it so that people did maybe have a way to understand, if they wanted to,
Yeah.
what it's like to train, what it's like to lose, what it's like to win, what it's like to travel, and all the little kind of inane details that go into being an elite athlete. And it turned out that there were some people that were interested. I don't pretend to think that my blog is for everybody or that it has an immense following or anything like that. But I do think for people that were interested, it was a resource, to kind of clue them into what was happening kind of behind the scenes. I don't know. And it was fun to do. And I knew it was something that I could have for myself in the future too, to come back to, which I've done. So.
Um, I somebody just asked the same guy that asked the question. I want to talk more about your blog, but this guy, it raised an interesting question, which you may have views on, about transgender athletes, which I hadn't thought to ask, to be quite honest. But
sure, I don't know if they want to work their asses off and not make any money. That sounds fun. Why should we prevent anyone from doing that? Yeah, I don't really know exactly where we're at with kind of legislation and rule writing for any of this kind of stuff. So I can't speak to kind of the technical aspects of it. But yeah, why can't people compete in sport? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with it.
On your blog, because there was obviously posts that you really enjoyed writing, and the energy and the buzz is there. One post that particularly springs to mind that I wanted to ask you about was the one you wrote. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
No.
Okay. It's the one you wrote after Rio, but you didn't publish for months until December, which is kind of really interesting. And that post is an extraordinary post because well, you can talk about it rather than me talk about it, but it was so heartfelt. It's quite difficult to read. I mean, let alone what it must have been to write. And then you didn't publish it for months, and so I thought that's really interesting.
What's the question?
Why did you write it? And thank you. That's a good question. Why did you write it? And why did you spend so long, pondering whether to publish it?
I don't know if I was pondering whether to publish it. I just needed to know that when I published it, I needed to be ready for the response. And I think for a period of time, I knew that if I published it, I wasn't going to want to read any comments. I wasn't going to want to get any emails about it. I wasn't going to want to, have to discuss it right away, like coming back in whenever it was. I forget the dates, but I knew that I wasn't going to want to talk about it with other people right away. So that was definitely part of it. And also I just needed to make sure that what I was saying was still true. Because I still remember writing it. I was, in my little dorm room in the village, and I can see it really clearly. And Tracy's over there, and I'm over here, and I'm typing, and I'm probably crying and like doing whatever. But I knew that I was going to have to put it away for a little while and sit on it, just because it was extremely emotional, and I knew that I wasn't going to be ready to kind of deal with it right away. And so I took those couple of months to work on some stuff and process it and kind of get over some of the really intense emotions. I was still angry. I was still pretty pissed off and disappointed in myself when I posted it. But I had just had enough time that I was ready to kind of start talking about it with other people, so that I was more open to discussing it, I guess.
Yeah.
At that time.
Has time changed what you think of that 5th place in Rio, or is it still the same as you wrote it in the blog?
Has not changed.
Okay.
That was a huge disappointment. We really dropped the ball on that. That was a huge, huge failure. Same with the women's pair in Rio.
Yeah.
Extremely problematic given how good the team was. That should never have happened.
Yeah. It's difficult to understand. It must be for you how you can be the fastest crew in the world going into the year before the Olympics and then not be closer to the medals or a medal crew or even winning again in 2016. Like how that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. And I don't know, even going into it, that I thought, oh, just because we won last year, we're for sure going to win this year. It was never that. I felt like we should have been competitive. If we would have won a medal, I think that would have been a success in the quad. Even if it wasn't the gold medal, I think we should have been competitive for a medal, and we weren't. We were not close to the medalists. And, same thing with the women's pair. There's no reason that they shouldn't have medaled that boat. And I'm not even saying that they had to win it, but they should have been in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
let's talk about your medals, because you I don't know if this is the right phrase. Your career is littered with medals, ranging from Olympic medals through to um, World Championship golds, World Championship silver medals.
mhm.
So, what would be a good one to start on? Your World Championship. Does the gold medal, does that have a special pizzazz for you, or does the Olympic medal, the 2012 bronze medal, top that?
I mean, they all kind of have a story behind them, right? Because I don't have like the big sequence of gold medals from 2008 all the way through 2016, like some people do. All of them, like you said, littered. They're kind of here and there, a little more inconsistent, and none of them in the 8 either. They're all in the kind of the other boats, the not the lesser boats, but kind of the more challenging boats that the U.S. has struggled to be more consistent in. So like the 2011 medal, actually, that's my first World Championship medal, and that one was really cool for me.
Silver in bled.
Yeah, that one was really cool because I mean I was stroking that quad, so that like really, as a younger athlete, that was pretty exciting, and I just really loved that boat. That was probably one of my favorite crews that I've raced, and it's just figuring out that we could be good just because the quad really wasn't good before that. And the
Yeah,
fact that we could be good, especially in the year before the games, that was so cool.
yeah, I
I
bet.
thought that was so exciting. And we were like a little surprised by ourselves and we're just all still so young. Oh God, let's go back to those days. But that was awesome.
You did say that you had different personalities, whether you were in the stroke seat or the bow seat,
No.
which might be true for anybody, but I sense it was particularly true for you the way you wrote about it.
Yeah, I'm such a pain in the ass. It's good that I haven't really done much stroking since then, especially as an older athlete, because then it probably would have been impossible for younger athletes to relate to me. So it was better, that I got sort of relegated to bow seat pretty much all the time,
Yeah,
except once we got back into the quads in
2012.
yeah.
You were in three seat there, weren't you?
Yeah, I started in 2 and then I moved to 3, which was fine. But the coaches tried several times to get me to row bow seat in the quad, and I never actually did. We
Ah,
tried many, many times. Pretty much every lineup that I rode, especially as I got older, it was just always put me in the bow seat because I love to cox.
yeah.
Coxing in the straight boats is a favorite pastime. But it just never materialized. Even in 2015, we tried really hard for me to be the bow seat, and it wasn't a good fit. So
You did say in the run up to that 2012 race that the seat racing and selection.
mm,
I mean, you must know more about seat racing than almost any other American oarswoman, given your longevity. But that particular camp you wrote was incredibly hard and tough. Why was that? What do you remember about it?
I mean, just the sheer volume of it was a lot. Which since then, the quad camps that we've had the past 2 years, Hillary Gaiman is really she's something because she's raced those ladies into the ground and put our 2012 camp to shame. But
Wow.
um, we did 20 some pieces, and a lot of them were longer distances, and um, we were all so close, and the stakes were pretty high for us because we had done well in the quad the year before, which was a new feeling inside the camp. Feeling like a seat in the quad really was actually a chance for a medal for the first time, maybe ever, maybe in a long time. I'm not really sure how to phrase that, but the stakes were just very high, and we were all so close. We'd all felt like we'd been through a lot, and knowing that there was going to be a large group of us that weren't going to make it was very, very hard. It made it pretty emotional for everyone.
Yeah.
Like I always think about Stacia Carlet was probably the one person that I thought that I definitely wanted in the boat.
Yeah.
And then it turned out she was the person that I had to seat race against to get my seat. I
Whoa.
seat raced her out. you know? So like that was hard on me and certainly on her. And it was just a series of that for many days. It was also like 90 degrees every day, so everyone was just
Yeah.
suffering. It was so hot and heavy for those couple of days. But
Do you
in the end, I do think we ended up with the right people, and it was
yeah.
worth it.
I mean, almost every selection system has seat races. I get I have the tendency to think that the American system seat races more though than other systems, or they seat race perhaps closer to the main event.
Yeah,
You know,
that
like
is true.
the German quads would be selected for a long time,
Yeah.
for a longer time before the event. I mean,
Mhm.
it would seem more logical to have a longer run up with a set crew to an event than
It
is.
would, but that has never been Tom's style. I think he has traditionally relied on that very intense series of races over a shorter period of time as being an opportunity for crew strengthening, crew bonding, team bonding, even if you don't make the team, and just figuring out how to handle very uncomfortable, very emotional situations and
Yeah,
be professional. So for him and for a lot of us, it actually was very important that seat racing didn't get drawn out over a long stretch of time and rather having it be condensed and packed into a couple of days. Um, we felt that we were able to get a lot out of that experience because it is so acute and so intense for a very relatively short period of time. And you get a lot out of that in terms of how it translates to your experience racing a world championship final or an Olympic final.
yeah.
Mhm.
Adrian Casti's asked the question about leadership, the balance between coach leadership and athlete input, and you've been very harsh on yours. I've this is a little bit of a feature of this chat, but uh, you were talking about yourself as you were berating yourself for not offering leadership, for being
Mm.
the experienced person. So leadership is a quality that you know a lot about. And Adrian's question is around input, you know, and I think somewhere else I read, you know, that you've been told as athletes not to input, to be
Right.
quiet.
Mhm.
Um, and clearly there's a tension between that and you of course were an athlete representative, I know.
Yeah.
So what's your views on this balance between coach leadership and athlete input?
I mean, I think oof, this is like a very broad question, right?
It
Because
is,
there's a
isn't it?
lot of
Yeah.
different things that you could use this question for. Like, are we talking about team culture? Are we talking about specifically selection or something else? Because I think if we're talking about the example of me feeling frustrated with myself for not speaking up more before Rio, that's specific to selection, right?
Yeah.
Versus, um, you know, giving the coaches input about kind of day to day
Yeah.
operations at the training center at the team. I think athlete input should be valued kind of at every level. Certainly, younger athletes need to have a voice, and older athletes need to have a voice. Um, but I do think that for me specifically, as I kind of aged up in the group, I started to feel more responsible to share feedback both from myself and from my teammates with the coaches and
Yeah.
serve as a conduit, whether or not I was officially an athlete representative or not. Whether or not that was appropriate or welcome by the coaches, that's a different subject. But it did kind of grow with my time on the team. I felt more obligated to do that and make sure that there was an exchange that was happening. Um, at the same time, I do tend to fall on the side of, with Tom and Laurel's camp specifically, needing to find a way to get on board and trust them as coaches because they are extremely successful and have so much experience both running camps and training center, but also performing internationally. So making sure that the coaches still have autonomy and the ability to make decisions and run the camps and the team and the selection and make those hard decisions with their expert subjectivity is
Yeah.
also really important to me.
I mean, I remember when I was an athlete that I would, because I was a very bullshit athlete, and so I would not shirk from making my opinions known. But you know, I had a job as well as I was rowing as full time as I could with a full time job, but I wasn't reliant for money from the squad. But whereas the athletes now, if you're reliant from squad funding and also squad selection, I've known athletes that have said, well, I can't say what I'm thinking because it would be seen as disloyal or, it might prejudice my chances of selection.
Sure. And certainly I've run into situations like that as an athlete on the team where I felt like I haven't agreed with what's been happening either at the admin level or with the coaches. But I mean, I think at a certain point, you also, as an athlete, need to understand that rowing is still just rowing. Um, and even though a lot of the experiences that you're going to have and the feelings you're going to feel are going to feel very intense, and like it is your whole life and it's life and death and it's like the most important thing in the world, it may feel like that, but it is still a sport. It is a game. We are privileged to be able to do it. And it also is not for everyone. There are a lot of people who try, and it's not always the correct thing for every athlete that's going to come to the team and trial, or for every athlete who's going to be invited to camp. And this is something that I feel like is also starting to change with athletes that are coming in. In the past, I felt like it was usually pretty straightforward for athletes who came in and maybe were struggling or didn't feel like the training center or the camp or the team were meeting their expectations. It was just like, okay, I'm not good enough to meet these standards, or something isn't working. Either I need to go somewhere else,
Yeah.
or I need to do something else. And rowing is not for me at this level. And that's okay.
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm starting to sense that more athletes that are coming in that aren't meeting standards, or the team doesn't meet their expectations, or they don't like the coaching style. The expectation is not that they might relocate or that they might find something else to do with their time. It's that they expect that the team is going to change for them,
That's
or that
interesting.
the coaches are going to change their style for them to meet their needs. On a certain level, I think, if there are gross violations of, personal safety or emotional abuse or manipulation, yeah, please don't do that, coaches or leaders or whoever. But if a team is successful and the coach is experienced and has demonstrated that he or she knows what they're doing, I don't know that I'm super comfortable with athletes coming in and saying, okay, this isn't working for me as an individual.
Yeah.
How do we change this so that it's good for me?
Uh-huh.
That was never even on my radar as a young athlete. I was like, wow, I'm not good enough to make the team. What do I need to do? I need to do what Erin Cafaro is doing. I need to do what Susan Francis is doing, and that will make me better if I want to stay here. And that is, it's a privilege to be here, and it's an honor to be here, and that I want to be with the best people, but it means that I have to make changes to myself, not that I'm going to ask Tom to change. That was like
Yeah.
never a thing. So I'm not sure how we arrived there, but that is another kind of what I feel has been changing.
That was really interesting. One of the races, I think you were in it, which was really striking, was I think it was in 2014, maybe you got a silver medal in the World Championships that year in the pair. But was that the year that you also raced in the American 8 and the pair you doubled up at Aiguebelette?
Yep. My one and only ride in the big yellow bus.
Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, I love
because that was go on. That was such an epic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna have one ever race in the American 8, why not have it be that one? That was so fun. It almost made me think that I would want to row the 8 again someday, but then I didn't. I don't know, what a cool opportunity. That was right after I had switched back to sweeping from sculling, right? So I had been
Yeah.
really exclusively sculling after being told that I was not good enough to be in the sweep squad, so I had to relegate myself to sculling for 8 or 10 years or whatever it was. And then it was all of a sudden like, we're going to pull the rug out from under you. If you want to stay here, you have to sweep now. And I was like, ooh, yuck, sweeping. But said, fine, I'll do it. Whatever, Tom, I'll show you. And then ended up winning the pair at the NSR with Carrie Simmons. And it was, all of a sudden, it was just like, okay, you haven't been sweeping for however many years. You've never been, you haven't done any international sweeping whatsoever. Let's go do 2 boats at once. And I was like, okay, wow, this is going to be something. But luckily, I had so many people that were going to be in that 8 lineup that really did know what they were doing. So I just kind of had to blend into the background in the bow seat and just not screw up. And they kind of would take care of everything else for me, which was very nice. But that was awesome. Yeah, just to get out there. And I felt like there were no expectations because I really didn't have any sweep pedigree at all, to just go out there and race and see what happened. And it ended up turning out okay.
And because you were down on the Canadians, weren't you, until
Yeah.
the last, 200, 250, 150
Yeah.
meters?
Yeah. I love going back and listening to the commentary on that race, because every once in a while, if I'm doing a workout and I want to, watch rowing videos while I'm working out on the bike or something like that, I'll pull that one up because it's just so fun to hear you and Sarah commentate that race, and to hear Caitlin's coxing in the background and see Caroline scream and all that stuff. It's just like, oh man, what a fun race.
Yeah. One thing I realized we haven't talked about, which I did want to ask you about, and I know you've vlogged about it, but was the list, which
Ooh, RIP. Yeah.
yeah, which was it was a really interesting thing that happened for what, 4 or 5 years, something like that.
Oh, let's see. The first one that I did was 2008. The last one that I did was in 2013.
Yeah. So and then maybe we can talk about the reasons why you I know you blogged about why
Yeah.
you stopped the list, but it was quite a fun thing. People used to anticipate it, look forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the genesis of it, and how much fun did you have doing it?
Okay, yes. Genesis was fun. It was something that on my first team in 2008, I was in the hotel with Ellen Tomek, and we were just going through kind of Beijing media stuff. And there were all these lists that kept popping up. It was like, top 10 hottest Olympic athletes or whatever. And there were never any rowers on the list. We were so mad because it was always just like beach volleyball and basketball. And we're like, okay, well, what about the rowers? Obviously, we just need our own. So then we just kind of were like joking about it, and I did it. And I was like, haha, maybe some people will read this and think it was funny, which they did, and it was fine. But yeah, that kind of grew into something. And once I realized it had some potential to really be something that the community could kind of rally behind and get a laugh out of and bond over a little bit and just have it be something that people could look forward to like make them smile. I was like, yeah, why not? That seems like a nice thing to do for the rowing community, and it's fun for me. And I got the guys at Row 2K to kind of help me out. I'd send them like a pre-scouting list of like, okay, if you can get photos of these guys during practice or like these guys or whatever. And Eric Dresser really did me a solid by kind of keeping everything on the DL and not leaking any of the list before it gets published. But that way I could have photos to add to the blog and there, add that element of multimedia, which made it kind of fun. And it just kind of grew. And I was like, what if I made a video or like a hype video? Would people think that was funny? And they did. And then I was like, well, what if the guys like all had t-shirts with their numbers on it? That would be funny. And, so then I got them those and sent it out to everybody. And, it just meant that I got to connect with all the guys one-on-one and meet people from different teams that I probably wouldn't have otherwise gotten to meet. And, a lot of them I'm still friends with, which is really, really kind of fun and nice in a sweet way. I hope I never offended any of those guys. It seemed like most of them were pretty good natured about it. So,
Yeah.
In retrospect, I do hope that no one was ever hurt or felt objectified or creeped out by me, but it is always possible. And if it is, I'm sorry. It was meant to be something fun that the rowing community could get excited about, and just something different that no one else was doing at the time.
Yeah, and it kind of had a life, like a distinct life for a set of years, and then you thought, right, okay, I'm now taking the decision to stop.
Yeah. When I decided to do that, I thought, is there a way that I can kind of modify it, or that I can have it adapt to kind of the culture that's changing? And could I make it like a power list, or could I make it a co-ed list or something like that? And I felt like it was getting into a gray area that I didn't want any of the female athletes to feel like they were being put in a weird position, especially if there were people I was going to be racing against, or if they were my teammates, or something like that. And, it was never my goal to make anyone feel uncomfortable or overly sexualized or anything like that. So I just thought, as women in sport, we don't like to be made to feel that way. And, if that's what we're going to say, I probably also shouldn't do it to other people. So let's maybe not do that anymore. So that was the decision. And I have taken everything down. I think I still have everything, but it just felt like the right thing to do at that point.
Yeah. A couple more things that you've spoken or written eloquently about. Black Lives Matter. There was a very powerful blog you put out about that, which is in the wake of George Floyd, and I know in rowing, I know Carlotta Nodudji from the German women's quad is very active in terms of Black Lives Matter. Can you say something about that and where the sport is now?
I mean, I wish I did know where the sport is now. I think certainly at kind of the elite level with USRowing, a lot of the national team changes have sort of taken the spotlight at this point. And certainly all the things that were like the lead up to Tokyo and things, it did feel like the BLM stuff kind of got put on a back burner for the time being, just because of current events with the games and priorities for that. Honestly, I don't know where we're at. I know I have a lot of people who have been doing a lot more diversity and inclusivity trainings, and I think that's good. But in terms of actual outreach programs and inclusion programs, I personally have taken a step back because I've been transitioning out of Princeton and back to San Diego. But certainly finding ways to continue to stay involved and not let it stay on the back burner as we kind of move through these transitions is going to be really important as an organization and as a sport.
Yeah. I really think so. Another aspect which you wrote about was money, and how much money you talked about.
How little money.
How little money you had. I think, when it was just $800 a month, and, you had a big repair bill for your truck that was $3,500, and how you could meet it. I mean, I couldn't imagine anybody having a job at the same time as doing a Tom Tahar training program.
I mean, I did do it for a period of time. I had a part-time
job.
How? I mean, logistically, it was actually pretty simple. I was working at the YMCA in Princeton, just at their desk. And we would go to practice in the morning. Sometimes we could go and put in a couple hours at the desk in between practice. So basically pack to go from practice to work to practice, and then either go back to work or go home. Or there was a very short shift in the evening that you could take that would be after practice, maybe like from 4 to 8 p.m. And you could work at the desk and check in kids for their swimming lessons.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. So I did do that for a period of time. Maybe not all the way through London, though. I maybe dialed that back once we got into the Olympic year. But certainly during Rio, I did not do that. I did not have the time or the energy to do that.
What's the minimum requirement for an athlete to support themselves and live, that they can focus on their training?
Oh, I really think it depends on where you are. If we're talking about U.S. athletes,
Does it?
I mean, the biggest asset that we have as athletes in Princeton currently is that there is a system of host family, kind of like residential sponsorships, I guess, if that's how you want to think about it. A lot of families that are connected to the rowing community somehow that offer to provide rooming, housing for the elite athletes that are at the training center. I stayed with host families off and on during my time. Most of the time I was renting, but there were periods that I stayed with a host family, and certainly I stayed with a host from all of the Tokyo quad when I was in Princeton, because I was technically living here, so I had a rental here with my boyfriend. But when I was in Princeton, I stayed with hosts. And that was such a huge help, because if I would have had to have paid rent in two places, that would have been impossible.
Yeah.
So removing housing costs for a lot of the athletes is a huge, huge help, especially because Princeton is extremely, extremely expensive to rent. But yeah, if you wanted to just go like living check to check, you probably need, I don't know, I'd say like $1,500 a month minimum.
Yeah. Will that be affected by the results in Tokyo for next year or not?
Probably. And that was, I mean, that was a huge concern of mine actually coming out of Rio, because we had the medal potential in several of those boats and underperformed so severely. I was like, oh my God, they're going to cut our funding for sure, because we really, really screwed this up. But then, yeah, then we went to Tokyo and we did even worse. So that's not a good look, I don't think. And it is a big concern of the people who are working so hard on the selection procedures and kind of all the leadership restructuring as well, is that they don't know yet actually what the budget's going to be, because they haven't gotten those numbers from the USOPC yet.
Yeah.
So that's also a driving factor between a lot of the changes that they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Those budget limitations.
You've had some great partners. Helen Tomac, you've spoken about. We haven't mentioned too much about Kerry Simmons and Tracy Isa. It's quite important, isn't it, having relationships with people to help you through, even though you are on your own, obviously, as you've spoken about during seat racing.
Yeah.
Do you want to say a bit about those relationships?
I mean, I think for some people, the relationships that I talk about having with my doubles partners and my pair partners are a little weird. I probably sound like a little clingy or a little obsessive, but I have always felt a huge pull to the two-person boats, whether it's the double or the pair. I'm not sure if that's just who I am as a person and rowing brought it out, or if it was rowing at Washington that sort of made me realize that. I'm not sure what the order was, but we row in the pairs so much at the University of Washington, and really kind of learn what the sport of rowing is through rowing the pair there really all the time. And I just loved the pair leaving school and certainly still coming to the national team. So the fact that I was able to find my way into the double was a huge blessing, because the double is awesome. The double is even better than the pair, to be honest, because it's the same.
Wow.
Like, so much faster. So that was just great. And I think Ellen and I were actually just very lucky, because I had actually been she was near the top of the selection group in 2008, and I was closer to the bottom. And for whatever reason, when we got in the double, we were just so much faster than any other combination that was at the camp at that time, and then decided to stay together. God bless her. She didn't have to do that, but she did. And it was great. I mean, obviously, again, we would have loved to have won a medal in the double in Beijing, but there's no way that we were ready to do that. We were up against some incredible doubles. And, the fact that we were cocky enough to think that we should show up there and like be competitive with the Ever Swindells is like kind of hilarious when you think about it now. But, we were excited about it. We're like, yeah, we're just going to show up and surprise some people or whatever. And it's going to be so cool. But it was great. And, I think just the honor and the privilege of having someone put all of their trust into you there's like nothing better than that in rowing. They decide that out of everybody that they could row with, that they want to row with you. I think that is such a special thing. And I've always tried really as a bow seat, because I am a career bow seat at this point in the 2-person boats, to try and make my stroke seat feel like they are the best stroke seat in the world, because to me they are, and doing whatever I can to just empower them and make them feel like they are special and talented, and just encourage them as much as I can and get them to trust me and be excited about rowing with me. That's always been really important to me, and it does seem to translate into having a relationship off the water as well.
Yeah, so. That's really interesting. You've got a unique view in the sport. What, as you look at the sport of rowing now, how strong a position do you think it's in? We could maybe make that relevant to the Olympics, or just in terms of the way the sport is raced at the moment, entries at world championships, that sort of thing. What's your take on rowing now?
I mean, I still love rowing. I still love the 2,000-meter distance because it's really hard. But I do understand that as a sport, we're going to have to evolve some way or another in order to kind of keep up with what audiences need and want in order to be excited about being supporters, fans, viewers. I think there's a lot of opportunities for sprint rowing, as opposed to, like, we're not talking about beach and coastal just yet, but for kind of the sprint venue, doing different distances. My thing that I would love is to see mixed gendered crews. I think that would be
me too. Yeah,
so cool. And like the mixed gender relays in track and field, I thought was like so interesting and like so cool, because there's so many different strategies that you can employ when you're having, four different runners. But yeah, I think mixed gendered and definitely mixed distances. I'm trying to think who it was. It might have been Eric Murray on the Row Show was talking about, having a cap number of athletes on a team and everyone has to double up. I think that's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of different opportunities that we could try out to see what people are interested in. But for me, for sure, front runner is mixed gendered. I think that would be like so much fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know why they've not asked you to do a row show yet, because
I don't know, probably because I'm a super fan. I'm like always like DMing them being like, oh, I love this. You guys are so cool. They probably think I'm like a weirdo. Actually, they're great though, because I've listened to most of their stuff, and I certainly started listening like basically as soon as they launched, and was listening to all kind of the old guys, like I loved Olaf's interview so much. I loved Drew's interview so much. And after I'd gone through a series of them, I was like, you guys need to get more women on the show. Here's my list of women that I want you to interview. And I think they've interviewed all of them, which is
wow.
Awesome. Yeah, because I reached out to a bunch of the ladies too, and I was like, hey, Kim, will you do this show? I would like love to hear it. Even Helen did it, which I DM'd her and was like, could you please do this show? It'd be so awesome to hear what you have to say. Yeah, so they got more women kind of involved, which is, I thought, so great, and people were so receptive to it. And now they've done, tons and tons of different female athletes, which has been great.
Yeah,
I love those guys. Maybe they'll invite me someday.
I'm hoping to get them on Crossy's Corner, actually.
Yeah, you should. They're so great.
Yeah. So we've been talking for over an hour and 20 minutes, actually, and I could easily go on for some more. But I'm just thinking we should probably try and draw things together. I know we started out by saying a little bit about how things have been post Tokyo, but and you've taken this time deliberately to wind down. So what about the next few months for you? How were they going to play out?
Hopefully in a very fun and relaxed way. I mean, the whole point of me kind of structuring in this time is sort of twofold, right? So I do feel like I need a mental break and a mental reset, just because I've been inside the training center, constantly bombarded with micro competitions every single day for over many years. And taking a step away from that, I think, is going to be very healthy and a nice break. The other part of it is the physiological aspect. I do feel like after I came back from Rio, I sort of rode my physiology through 2017, because we were all extremely fit at that point. Like, wow.
You wrote like you were Superwoman, didn't you, at that point, or
I mean,
something about?
it was so awesome. I'm telling you, it was epic. It was so epic. We were so fast. It was amazing. And so, I mean, and that was part of the reason that I wanted to come back afterwards. I was like, this is legit. I want to be this fit forever. This is awesome. So I kind of rode that through 2017, but the training changed a lot after Rio for a lot of reasons. And then from basically the kind of the end of 2017 through 2021, I really struggled with my physiology and figuring out a system or a training plan that could start to move me back in the direction of achieving those PRs and those really fast workouts that I was achieving prior to Rio. And it's something that I talked about with my coaches a lot. There were a number of other returners that were also struggling with similar things, like really, really having a difficult time producing competitive C2 numbers or numbers that were even close to kind of our pre-Rio PRs. And we just were never able to come up with a solution for those physiological shortcomings in the past, like I'd say 4 years. So I think for me, taking some time off to kind of reset my body physically, if I do want to come back, is going to be very important.
Yeah.
So that I can try to figure out how to get the physiology right if I come back.
Yeah.
Because I think trying to keep going kind of at the pace or in the style that I was going before Tokyo would not set me up to be successful if I wanted to do another games. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Greg Cohen, maybe you get the last word for a question. I guess he means coaching.
Oh no, he is not. He's talking about
What's he?
Standgate 2018. I criticized Clark Dean for standing up in his
what was
it? Junior National 8.
Okay, I thought.
I mean, I think I made it pretty clear. I don't really think that you need to stand up in the boat afterwards. I think, like, if you win the Olympics, please feel free to stand up in the boat because you're an Olympic gold medalist. I'm not so sure that if you're a junior national champion that you need to stand up and make all the other little high school boys feel like shit after the race.
Yeah.
And, you know, I talked to Clark after that all happened because I think it really got blown out of proportion kind of unnecessarily. But we do live in cancel culture, so all the little teenagers on the internet got pretty upset about that. You know, I talked to him about it because it is something that happened to me as an elite competitor in 2010. Annie Vernon did that at the World Championships, which, I mean, sure, if you win a world championship and you feel like the only way that you can possibly go on existing is by standing up in the boat to celebrate, like, okay, go ahead. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to put a target on your back for the rest of your career, which it did.
Yeah.
And I thought about her a lot over the next year. And then, you know, what happened is that we beat them at the World Championships and they had to go to the B final.
Yeah.
And that sucked for them, but it was good for me. So,
you
know, I mentioned that to Clark and I was like, you know, these are guys that you're probably going to be racing against for a couple of years. And, you know, maybe they're going to be your teammates on the national team someday. Like, you probably don't want to be that dude because you got a lot of races ahead of you that may include some of these people. And he was fine, you know, but, you know, he has a lot of fans on the internet that were not a fan of me at that point, which is understandable. You know, like I said, if you say stuff in public, you're not going to make everyone happy all the time. So that
bearing in mind what you've said just then, will you be writing more in the blog
I really hope so. I really do. It's something I've been so conscious of over the past 5 years, kind of neglecting that and feeling like I've kind of withdrawn from it. There are actually a number of things that I've drafted and never posted because I felt like they would be extremely controversial. And I never knew when the right time would be to write about that and talk about the experiences that I've had on the team since 2017. In particular, there was an event in 2017 that was extremely disappointing, that really hurt me as an athlete, involving some USRowing staff in a safe sport violation. Not Tom, not Laurel. It was one of the men's team coaches. But that was really, really hard on me and made me just feel very kind of alone and a little bit abandoned by the rowing community.
Yeah.
Not of any fault of any of the people that I've connected with through my blog or anyone else, but it was really, really hard. And I definitely kind of retreated at that point. And yeah, I have written only a little bit since then. I've used Instagram a little bit more as kind of a form of microblogging here and there, little things. But like I said, I've written some longer pieces that I haven't ever published.
Yeah.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think, from some of the comments, I know Adrian Cassidy has just your view on leadership and coaching and coaches, athlete leadership, and he really welcomed listening to that. And it's been so cool to listen to you. I mean, we could really go on for part 2, really, I think.
Happy to do it. My schedule is wide open these days.
Okay, Megan. So I think I'll say thank you very much, Megan Kalmoe. You've been an absolute brilliant guest. We'll end the live part of the interview there. You are a legend in the sport of rowing and will continue to be so.
Oh, thank you, Martin. And I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to talk. It's really nice after all these years to sit down and chat with you, huh?
Yeah, lovely.